My conceptual interview, I interviewed two 8th grade students from Tates Creek Middle School. One student was pseudonym Michelle from El Salvador, and the second was pseudonym Adrian. So the most interesting ideas that I found during the interview was there were about three interesting ideas. The first one was the idea of education in El Salvador. So Michelle just moved to the United States about 10 months ago, and this was her first full year of the American education system. And I asked her all of the questions in the interview translated into Spanish because her English still is not very good. And when I asked her about static electricity first, she had no idea what it was and had never heard of the topic before. But then when I started explaining what it was and when it happened and when it could happen in real life, she realized that she did know what static electricity was, but she had never heard about it in school. So they had never taught her that in school. Another thing I learned from Michelle was that she was technically supposed to be in 7th grade in her home country, but she was placed in 8th grade here in the United States. So she technically missed a whole year of schooling and was not able to have all those connections that the 8th graders at Tates Creek who had 7th grade do now as 8th graders. The second main idea was the connection to lightning. Static electricity causes lightning in the clouds, and that's actually something that I didn't even fully understand until this year, but both students did not know this before the interview, and it actually prompted them to want to know more, which was great. So after both interviews, I ended up showing them a video that explained the concept, and they realized that it was really cool, and they found something new with static electricity that they could share to other people. But the concept of static electricity connecting to lightning was never taught to them in school. The last important and interesting idea was that teachers do stand out to students. So Adrian told me that he had a lot of hands-on experiments and labs in his 7th grade science class, and that definitely stood out to him because he knew what static electricity was, he knew how the charges reacted to each other and what forces were caused to create static electricity. So that stuck in his mind, and having those hands-on experiments and labs actually helped him greatly. There were a couple lessons that I learned during the interview about actually interviewing and asking good questions. The first one was questions. All of my questions, I tried to focus them on the student themselves. So instead of saying, "What does static electricity mean?" I said, "What do you think static electricity means?" So that hopefully helped prompt the student to think for themselves and not think back to a textbook definition, which I think is a good question. The second thing was that answers can definitely go off topic. As you could tell, I learned a lot about each student that actually wasn't connected to any of my interview questions, but we were able to learn things about each other in the interview that were not expected. That still helped with the understanding of the topic. Another lesson that I learned about asking good questions and interviewing was that answers from students can be very, very detailed, and they can go on for a long time. So I had initially told Miss Mannion, their science teacher, that I was only going to be with them for 5 to 10 minutes, and I ended up being with Michelle for at least 30 minutes just talking about school and everything she had learned in the past few years, while Adrian, I was with him for about 20 minutes. So interviews can go on for a very long time, but just like I said before, even if the answers go off topic, um, I definitely learned a lot about these students, and I connected better with these two students that I interviewed than any of the other students in the science class, which was interesting. So I found two main implications of what I learned about teaching the concept of static electricity, or actually teaching science in general. So when teaching about static electricity or any topic in science, I definitely need to ask the class beforehand what people know already and what. Um, so if they're learning about static electricity, I need to know which students know what static electricity actually is and what it does, just to clarify what students actually know, and I know where to begin teaching. Because if the majority of the class ends up not knowing what static electricity is, then I will have to start from the very beginning, but at least I know that the students will not be left behind. Um, to teach static electricity, I have to bring in the idea of static electricity with a crazy phenomenon like lightning, which we plan on doing in our micro teaching. So students can definitely understand that concept and remember it. You usually think of static electricity with a balloon and a carpet or fuzzy socks and a doorknob. Um, but having something in nature that students see all the time in storms, they can think about static electricity every time a lightning storm occurs. Um, so having something crazy like that phenomenon will have students remember the concept better. I also think that if I start the idea of static electricity at a small level, which is like the fuzzy socks on a carpet and the doorknob, and explaining static electricity that way, something that the students actually experience themselves, and then moving to the big things like lightning or other major events that can occur with static electricity, that can help the understanding of static electricity flow better for each student. And the second implication was teaching science is definitely going to be tough, but students are definitely willing to learn. And if you make the class fun, enjoyable, and have a lot of hands-on labs, the students are going to be able to grasp concepts better. And as Adrian would say, if you have really cool labs, he's going to remember that forever.